Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Shadow City podcast. I am your host, Larry, and this is the Shadows Within. Got some shows to go over. Starting with the GPW The One Challenges continues. This was part 4. All these matches consisted of Steel Cage. Steel Cage, Alexander versus Ranger Rogue, with Ranger Rogue walking away victorious. And there was like a tournament to kick us off in the beginning. I want to make that clear. So that was round 1. Ranger Rogue advancing to the second round. Steel Cage Nexus versus Carnage, with Carnage advancing to the second round. Steel Cage Bobo the Clown versus Buster Anderson, with Bobo the Clown advancing to the second round. Steel Cage The Monster versus ABM, with the Monster advancing to the second round. Steel Cage Ranger Rogue versus Carnage, with Ranger Rogue advancing to the second round. To the finals. Steel Cage Bobo the Clown versus Monster, with Monster advancing to the finals. Steel Cage Ranger Rogue versus Monster, with Ranger Rogue walking away victorious. The One Championship, Ranger Rogue versus the champion Logan Frost. Steel Cage with Ranger Rogue walking out the new champion. Ranger Rogue walking out the new champion. Steel Cage Jack Frost versus Carnage, with Carnage walking away victorious. Steel Cage Logan Frost versus JJ Urban Gladiator, with Logan Frost walking away victorious. Steel Cage Jaquil versus Michael Link McIntyre, with Michael Link McIntyre walking away victorious. Steel Cage Jay Blaze versus Ace Green, with Jay Blaze walking away victorious. Steel Cage Aku versus Cash Gordy, with Aku walking away victorious. Steel Cage Logan Frost versus Michael Link McIntyre, with Michael Link McIntyre walking away victorious. Steel Cage Jay Blaze versus Aku, with Jay Blaze walking away victorious. Steel Cage Jay Blaze versus Logan Frost, with Jay Blaze walking away victorious. The One Championship Steel Cage Jay Blaze versus the champion Ranger Rogue, with Ranger Rogue retaining the gold. The HOH main card, WWM Television Championship, Ace Green versus the champion Nels Wade, with Nels Wade retaining the gold. Emma Frost versus Nina versus RFL versus Gina Jaw versus Nikita versus the champion Reagan Anderson for the IC Championship, where Reagan Anderson retained the gold. HOH UK Championship, Jay Crusher versus the champion Ronan Drake, with Ronan Drake retaining the gold. Cold Front versus the Final Four for the GPW World Tag Team Championships, where the Final Four are the champions, with Cold Front walking out the new champions. HOH UK Championship for the ladies, Britt Monet versus the champion Wendy Rogue, with Britt Monet walking out the new champion. 10-man gauntlet eliminator, Adam Skull versus Big C versus Logan Frost versus Mason Payne versus Sebastian Storm versus Ace Cannon versus Bobby Ball Tucker versus Michael Link McIntyre versus Nexus versus Monster, with Logan Frost walking away victorious. Hashtag Frost versus Turtle Harrington for the HOH Heavyweight Championship. Turtle Harrington is the champion, with hashtag Frost walking out the new champion. Outlaw, the champion, versus Aku versus Ranger Rogue for the GPW Light Heavyweight Championship, where Ranger Rogue walked out the new champion. Buster Anderson versus Carnage, the champion for the GPW World Championship, where Carnage retained the gold. GPW Bruiserweight Championship, Big Lou versus the champion Alexander, with Big Lou walking out the new champion. Now for ASW, Noah Butler versus Todd Wilson, with Noah Butler walking out victorious. Victoria Ritchie versus Isabella Steele, with Victoria Ritchie walking out victorious. Lily Rose versus Violet Dev versus Obsidian Vex, with Obsidian Vex walking away victorious. Fatal 4-way between Dominic Davino, Zian Noir, Lawrence Caldwell, and Psycho, where Zion Noir walked away victorious. EWTE match, 4-on-4 elimination. Jackson Wright, Ball, Inkslinger, and Grimlord versus Damian Briggs, Mr. Bones, Big Time, and Wallace, where Jackson Wright, Ball, Inkslinger, and Grimlord walked away victorious. ASW rules, Haley Ramone versus Rachel Blade, with Rachel Blade walking away victorious. Garmar versus Seven Winters, with Seven Winters walking away victorious. Kai Luana Wilson versus Jules Wigginton versus Winter Storm, with Jules Wigginton walking away victorious. ASW rules, the Problem One versus John Wigginton, with the Problem One walking away victorious. IZW Forged in Blood, IZW Bloodlust Championship, Fatal 4-Way Falls Count Anywhere, Taryn Williams versus Taylor Griffin versus Hoops, versus the champion Isabella Graves, where Taylor Griffin retained the gold. IZW Tag Team Championships, Alex King and Max King versus KD and Combat Genius versus the champions Nels Wade and Rome, where Alex King and Max King walked out the new champions. Angel Bryant versus Betty Blade, with Angel Bryant walking away victorious. Falls Count Anywhere, Gage Payton versus Bullet, with Gage Payton walking away victorious. IZW Women's Championship Ambulance RFL versus the champion Riley, with Riley retaining the gold. 3 Stages of Hell, Extreme Rules, Inferno, and Casket. Unhinged versus Eddie Walker. Extreme Rules, Unhinged. Inferno, Eddie Walker. And in the final, the casket match, Eddie Walker walked away victorious, winning the 3 Stages of Hell. IZW Lockdown Championship, Hell in a Cell. Buster Anderson versus the champion AJ Woods, with Buster Anderson walking out the new champion. Mixed tag match between Rob Anderson and Dirty Diana versus Big Lou and Baby Bone Crusher, where Big Lou and Baby Bone Crusher walked away victorious. IZW International Championship, Nexus versus Adrian Danger versus the champion Jack Graves, where Adrian Danger walked out the new champion. IZW Blood Pit Championship, Jaquil the champion versus CJ Frost, where Jaquil retained the gold. 5 Tables of Death, Jen versus Amazon versus Kaiba Frost versus Nina versus Jules Wigginton, where Amazon walked out victorious. Tornado Tag, Carter Goldman and Chase Goldman, morning, versus the Red Reapers, Travell Daniel and Keith Hunt, where the Goldmans walked out victorious. 2 out of 3 Falls, Sonia Ortiz versus Becca Edwards, with Sonia Ortiz walking away victorious. IZW Universal Championship, Steel Cage Akane versus the champion Blade, with Blade retaining the gold. EWS Gold Rush Part 2, Extreme Rules, Cass M. Demoise versus Brick Graves, with Brick Graves walking away victorious. Extreme Rules, Ali Blade versus Susie, with Ali Blade walking away victorious. Extreme Rules Starlight versus Danny Blade, with Danny Blade walking away victorious. Extreme Rules Violet Zero versus Daniel Demoise, with Violet Zero walking away victorious. Extreme Rules Haya the Huntress versus Kaiva Justice, with Kaiva Justice walking away victorious. Extreme Rules Loki Hellion versus Angelina West, with Loki Hellion walking away victorious. Extreme Rules Kyra Hex versus Rachel Sawyer, with Kyra Hex walking away victorious. Extreme Rules Scarlet versus Nyx Nightshroud, with Nyx Nightshroud walking away victorious. Extreme Rules Ali Blade versus Danny Blade, with Ali Blade walking away victorious. Extreme Rules Kaiva Justice versus Brick Graves, with Brick Graves walking away victorious. Extreme Rules Nyx Nightshroud versus Kyra Hex, with Kyra Hex walking away victorious. Extreme Rules Loki Hellion versus Violet Zero, with Loki Hellion walking away victorious. Extreme Rules Loki Hellion versus Ali Blade, with Ali Blade walking away victorious. Nyx Nightshroud versus Brick Graves, Extreme Rules, where Brick Graves walked away victorious. Extreme Rules Ali Blade versus Brick Graves, where Brick Graves walked away victorious. At some point, either today or tomorrow, I will be going over the recent All-Star Pro episode. But that's really what I had to go over at the moment. On Monday the 13th, I will be interviewing Aiden Sparks. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I hope everybody has a great day. Good night. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever y'all may be. Peace out.